This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Welcome to the premiere episode of the Wrestling War Zone, the Monday Night War retrospective series. I'm JT, coming at you here from the PTB studios. Joining me tonight is a man that we've done like many hours of podcasts together, but we've never officially co-hosted a show together, and that was part of the reason why I reached out to him to do something like this, and this is the topic we landed on. But I'm going to go ahead and bring in my partner on the show, my co-host extraordinaire. You know him from Where the Big Boys Play, and a bunch of other shit too, and that is Chad Campbell. Chad, how are you?
I'm good. I'm all cleared up and ready to go for this new endeavor.
Running lean and mean. So do you want to talk about kind of how this came together?
Well, I mean, this kind of veers off of the Vintage Vault refreshes you've been doing on site with Scott for the Raws. And I don't know. I mean, like Monday Night Wars, I know it kind of feels like, to some degree, a topic that's been beaten to death in some corners, but kind of in the Place to Be Nation lexicon, it really hasn't been touched on too much, kind of surprisingly. If you look at the vintage vaults that were done originally for the pay-per-views and stuff we're going to be talking about, they're, about 7, 8 years old at this point, about 6 or 7 years old. And then otherwise, I think this is kind of one of those errors, much like you're seeing now on the Place to Be podcast, where, y'all are going through the rock and wrestling stuff, and the Attitude Era to me is, and the Monday Night Wars is kind of the same way, where, I mean, the high points, like, WrestleMania 3, Hulk and Andre, we all know Sting and Hogan, we all know some of the high points with Austin and McMahon and stuff like that. But it is rewarding, and I think a worthwhile endeavor to go back and look at kind of the connective tissue week to week with some of this stuff. Because, like, with the Place to Be podcast, you're seeing how impressive Andre has been in small doses and how prominent he's been. And overall, that's really, like, helped the build to now where, just through listening to you guys and watching some of the stuff along with you guys, like, I'm actually really excited about, like, the main event match and stuff like that. So I'm sure we'll find that out too here. We'll find some hidden gems. We'll kind of see what holds up. I'm sure some stuff won't, but I do think nowadays in the internet wrestling community with such a short attention span where things get forgotten every other day, it is kind of refreshing to go back and look at what was, I know for you and for me, kind of a peak moment in our fandom where week in, week out, this was when wrestling was thriving. We had a lot of conversation pre-internet. I can remember kind of the phone calls, the kind of party line phone calls I would have during some Nitros and Raws. So I'm looking forward to it, actually.
Yeah, and you're right. It is an area we haven't really touched on too much at PlaceToBeNation.com. We've kind of, Scott and I kind of got to the outskirts with our written pieces, like you mentioned. We're pausing those, but just due to time in the writing part of it. But I wanted to continue through the era because it's an era like I've been really excited to get to in my watching, but I feel like if I'm going to watch it all, we should do something for it. So I was kind of just, batshit with you one night, or whatever the word is, but bullshit with you, I guess. Maybe batshitting will be our official term for it here tonight.
Spitballing.
Spitballing.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, maybe. I was kind of venting to you, actually. Like, I'm kind of torn. I don't know what I want to do. I want to watch this stuff. And I was like, it would be kind of cool to do, like, quick pod, maybe blasts on it. And then it kind of turned into a podcast idea. And then I said, why don't we do it? Because we haven't really done anything together. And, it seemed to pique your interest. So we decided to start in basically with the Monday Night Wars. Obviously, late 95 is when Nitro starts. To me, that was the clear point to start. We batted around, like, should we start a little bit earlier? Should we start later? But it just felt like the right place to start to take us right through. Our goal would be, obviously to get through the Monday Night Wars. And, some of the stuff I've seen a lot, like 96 Raw, I've seen a lot. But some I haven't. Like 98, 99 Raw, I don't remember a ton about. WCW, I didn't really dive deep into at that time. Like, I remember watching it, but not over and over because it wasn't available. Like, I had all those Raws on tape, so I watched them, for years. But it's definitely an era that's, like you said, there's so much going on that I think we'll pick up on a lot of stuff people may have overlooked or forgotten. Like, Nitro has a ton of random cameos that just come and go. Yeah. And on the flip side, Raw, especially when you get to 97, has so many random things that they were thrown against the wall to see what could stick. And we have some categories that we're going to track in different things. Like, one is going to be dropped angles, so I think that'll be fun to track from week to week. Like, what do they kick off one week, and then 2 weeks later we don't, we never hear from again. And we have some other categories that we'll wrap at the end of the show. So the format week to week is pretty simple here. When it's a TV week for us, we're going to look at the Raw and the Nitro from that week. We're going to compare the two. We'll rank the two. And then when we hit a pay-per-view chronologically, that podcast will be just on the pay-per-view. So, for example, we're starting with the first official week of the war. So we're skipping Nitro number 1. And that was kind of a selfish reason, Chad, because we've done a live watch on the podcast. I did it with Alan on Letters from Center Stage. I feel like I've done it like a third time somewhere else. Like, I'm good with watching the first Nitro again at this point.
Yeah, I rewatched it just to be kind of up to speed, and when you can kind of memorize, here's when Luger comes out, here's when Norton comes out. I mean, the time cues. So we've seen that one a lot, and that is something that's been played out at Place to Be Nation. So we decided to start with the first true head-to-head week. Yeah,
and then so an example of how we'll flow is this week we'll be looking at the Raw Nitro from 9/11/95, and then we would hit Fall Brawl. So our next episode 2, will just be on Fall Brawl. And then we'll do the Raw Nitro the next night. And then as we get to, I think it's In Your House 3, will be our first WWF pay-per-view. We'll watch that and talk about it. So, and we'll do things a little differently. I mean, obviously, Scott and I have done the WWF pay-per-views. And, probably, again, as we go through the reboot. But Chad and I are going to do a different spin on it. So it's not as, we're not going to do fun facts in history. We're going to look more at, in real time, kind of the week to week, versus like trying to put it into historical perspective. We're going to focus more on, all right, what's this guy doing now? What's that guy doing now? Is the push working? Kind of living in the moment to see how the show's going, head to head. So, anything else you want to add before we dive in?
No, I think that gives the parameters of the show pretty well.
All right, cool. And also, what we'd like to do too is when you listen back, we're going to kind of rank the show for the night, who the winner was, the MVPs, best match. Like, share your thoughts too on our social media sites. If you want to watch along with us, if you plan on doing an Attitude Era rewatch too, and share your thoughts too if we're off or whatever. We can do some feedback on the show, Chad, next week and share everyone's thoughts too. So,
sure.
All right. So why don't we start with Monday Night Raw this week, and maybe week to week we'll alternate or something like that. But for now, from what I recall, they're both at 9 p.m. So both airing at the same time. So the 9/11 Raw comes at us from Canton, Ohio, the Canton Civic Center. It was actually a taped show. It was taped August 28th. And aired September 11th, 95. And this is an interesting episode because it's the kind of season opener. They dubbed it. Lex Luger had bolted from the WWF on September 7th. And as you referenced him showing up at the first Nitro. So WWF was kind of on their heels. They wanted to freshen up the show, new fall season. So this is where they did the Raw on the Roof, where they called basically, emergency meeting for a bunch of wrestlers and staff. They went up to the roof of Titan Tower and filmed this open. They had a ring up there and everything else. And so we see this kind of iconic opening to kick off Raw. Any thoughts on kind of how that all went down?
Yeah, I think that just with the opening of this show, and I didn't even realize this was the first week they did that till I read y'all's review from a few weeks ago that mentioned it. I think this is like the perfect bridge between what will become kind of the Attitude Era Raw opening that we associate with, and still kind of some holdovers from the the Manhattan Center and the infancy era of Raw, because you still get like the saxophone or whatever at the very end,
right, yeah.
But you have like the helicopter with the spotlight, and it kind of feels like a quote unquote war zone more, with them sort of fighting on the roof in a unkept manner, like you don't really know where they are.
Except Sean's still
a little more
tights.
dangerous. Yeah, that's true.
Flying through the air. The late '95 is an interesting time in WWF, because '95 gets pretty maligned overall as a year. And Scott and I, again, covered most of the actual year, but late '95 is interesting, as we'll see, because you can tell they're trying to mix things up. A little bit of the early Attitude kind of slips in. There's a little more dark, hard hitting. Bill Watts plays a role in that, as we'll see. So it's actually an interesting time period in the WWF to check out. We're kind of edging past the cheesiness of the summer, and now they're focusing a little bit more as we hit the end of the year. So, all right. So why don't you walk us through Raw, and we'll kind of comment and grade the matches as we go along.
So we're going to kind of, I guess, just give a little bit of narration segment by segment. So. Yep. The first segment, we do get the SummerSlam recap, which is odd that it's September 11th and we're getting a SummerSlam recap. But mainly focus.
So just to cover there, this is the first Raw since then, too.
Raw since then, yeah.
Yeah, because of the U.S. Open.
So it really does feel like this is kind of, I don't know. I mean, it feels like one of the longest breaks they've taken, really. I mean, you don't really associate WWF or E being kind of away for 2 weeks, but it feels like that's happened here. But they focus on the ladder match, which is a good thing. Vince calls it one of the greatest matches in WWF history, which actually, for hyperbole Vince, that's actually kind of accurate in my opinion.
Especially at that time. I mean, right?
Yeah.
As of August of '95.
What could have been... There wasn't many contenders, especially in '95. We show Bulldog turning, and like any good heel, he got a haircut.
Much needed haircut. Yeah, much needed haircut. And Bulldog's an interesting case. Well, it'll be fun to watch him evolve as a heel, because after watching most of '95, he really was wasted. For a time where they were struggling for top names, like he really just kind of floats along. And I mean, he had the look, he had the name value, he could work. And after the Rumble, he doesn't really do too much of anything. He's on Raw prominently, but not really doing much until here. So it was a good refresh for them to go this route with him.
Right. And then, like you said, they call it the new fall season, which is an interesting kind of little twist. Vince says Cal Ripken may call in sick to watch this show, which I somehow doubt.
Probably. Imagine that if he broke the streak. Oh, I'm really going to watch this season opener of Raw. Sorry, I can't play tonight.
Maybe some individuals that work at certain retail chains, Place to Be Nation members, might call in sick to watch the season premiere of Raw, but probably not Cal. No, not Cal. And with that, we kind of go right into our first match, which is Razor Ramon and Bulldog. And I mean, to me, these do kind of feel like sort of, I guess, kind of, at fall of 1995 with these two, they feel sort of lost in the wind, like you mentioned, with Bulldog. So Bulldog had just turned, and Razor, after the ladder match, I think it was kind of uncertain, like, where he was headed. I think this match gives a pretty good indication, but I don't know. What do you think about Razor in 1995, watching through all the Raws up to this point?
Yeah, so again, a guy that felt a little bit misused, and I mean, if you want to believe the Titan Sinking series, we had James Dixon on a while ago. Actually, I did. I guess that was the non-Scott PTB episode.
Well, the only non-Scott that actually made air.
That's right. There was another one that was lost in the wind. But yeah, if you believe that, he was supposed to turn heel back at WrestleMania and fight The Undertaker, which I think could have been big. Because him and Diesel had good chemistry too, and their feud wasn't totally played out. Like they feuded, in '94, but not overwhelmingly. So a heel Razor in the summer might have been a big boon to Diesel's run. But yeah, no, then he gets hurt. before King of the Ring. He's got the rib injury, so he's out for a while. He misses the tournament, and then he's kind of just palling around with Savio, and then he just gets chucked into the ladder match with Shawn. Like, there's no build to it. He's just thrown in because the match with Sid was going to suck, and they needed to save the show. So you're right. He's not really doing much. Ever since he kind of got paired away from Jarrett, he's a little bit aimless. But that definitely changes big time here because he's given a full direction.
So, our first match is Ramon versus Bulldog. A couple of notes I took. So, Lawyer called a female fan in the crowd the pooper scooper. Which is
that like really, Bulldog's ring rat? Is that what he's saying?
It's really harsh. And she was a very prominent fan. One thing I think as we go through the review of both these shows, and I'm privy to both our notes and stuff like that. I thought both these shows were decent. These were fine offerings, but you can really tell a difference in the crowd and the presentation. I really do think that can't be overstated enough. That Nitro feels fresh and new, and this Raw crowd that was taped 2 weeks before, and this was I don't know if this was the first taping or first of the night or kind of what the sequence was, but even then there was a certain kind of canned quality where the crowd did not seem too up for this show. That the pink pooper scooper fan was probably the most energetic, but overall the crowd seemed pretty maligned at the content for the product at this point. And
it's funny because for years, like in the 80s and early 90s, WWF is kind of the cutting edge, right? They kind of mock the Smoky Bingo Hall and all this, whatever, beer hall.
Right.
And they're cutting edge. And now, all of a sudden, things have flipped where they feel like the old school promotion. Like you said, just like back in Allentown or whatever, just like canned in front of a block crowd and just kind of going through the motions a little bit. And Nitro now feels, cutting edge. Like, holy shit, here we are. Ruckus crowd, live every week, big time matches, loaded with name value, name stars. All of a sudden just comes out of nowhere. That said, the Raw production in 95 actually thought was their slickest to date. Like, the leaps and bounds they make in the swift pacing of the show, I thought was pretty interesting in 95. I'm curious to see how you feel as we move along. Like, I feel like they really got a good pacing down as they hit the middle of the year. And the graphics, just the overall production is I think, ahead of WCW in that regard. But yes, as a wrestling show, Nitro feels much more alive.
Yeah, and I don't, we don't want to make this, a comparison to 2018, but it was refreshing being able to watch these shows during a lunch break. I mean, 45 minutes and you watch a show and everything moves steadily along. That was a nice change of pace instead of having to skip around and
it's one of the things I'm most excited about this era is like the pacing, everything moves, the still threading with the story. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm not one to completely, like you said, to completely compare or shit on the modern day because the in-ring action we get is, light years above what we've seen here. But, but there is a certain charm to, yes, just quick, simple, to the point, move along, let's get going.
So the match proper, it does go through a commercial break. So they have that, and it's a pretty. I would say this is a pretty baseline, rudimentary TV match. You show Razor as the face, and Bulldog kind of working himself out as a heel. I mean, when was the last time he was heel? Before this?
I mean, Stampede.
I don't even know. It'd have to be. I don't even think it was on tape, which is kind of interesting. I mean, it's not
that
something
91
you really think about.
Weren't they heels when they left WWF? Did they go to England or back to Stampede? Right? Didn't they work as heels? 89, 90 or something like that?
I don't know if there's any footage. Right. I mean, I know there's footage of them in Japan, but
we've never seen him. Definitely in WWF. It's his first ever heel run.
Right. So I did think we got a nice power slam from Bulldog. He's kind of focusing a little bit on the back, but it's not that huge of a focal point. when they do come back.
It's like Vince is actually pushing it more than he is. Like Vince keeps saying, Razor hurt from the ladder match. He's looking at the back. He's working the back. But you're right. Like it wasn't really coming through in the work.
No.
Vince was kind of pushing it more than Bulldog was.
Pushing the narrative. I thought Vince and King were pretty good here.
Yeah.
As far as the commentary, they had a good back and forth rapport with each other. So Razor starts making his comeback. The official gets bumped, and Razor kind of struggled to get Bulldog up for the Razor's Edge. I don't know if Bulldog was sandbagging him or what the deal was there, but that looked a little odd. And then we get Dean Douglas coming out in jeans and a dress shirt, and he hits an elbow.
It was like the outfit you had on at your kid's reading thing the other day. Same color shirt. Tie.
Come on.
Oh, God.
As you're dying. Yeah.
Oh, it's been a rough 2 days. One quick point, Vince and Lawler, too. They actually hadn't been around together as long as you would have thought at this point. I always reconciled them as the voices of Raw for ever. But they didn't really become the regular team until after WrestleMania 11.
Wow.
Yeah, they did.
Thought that.
Lawler did some Raws, but as the steady voice, it wasn't until 11, which is surprising to me.
Yeah, because I would think from WrestleMania 10 onward, because you have Ted DiBiase for Royal Rumble, but
right.
At WrestleMania 10 throughout, I besides your boy Art O'Donnell, but
yeah, he ends up just at Savage for a while. And then Savage leaves, and they kind of do guest stuff. And then Shawn actually does it for a while in late '94, early '95. Then DiBiase pops in, and they kind of rotate again. And then once WrestleMania hits, it's pretty much Vince and King every week. So, but no, they do have pretty good chemistry by this point. They've settled in as the voices of Raw. So the Dean Douglas thing's interested too. So he had signed on. He'd been around since the summer. He had been doing grades, and at SummerSlam he graded Razor's match, and gave him an F or whatever it was. And that pretty much, and the Razor attacked him backstage, and that kicked us off.
So Dean Keith was giving his grades out. So the finish, 1, 2, 3 Kid tries to quotation marks help Razor. Ends up splashing Razor when Bulldog moves out of the way. The ref calls a DQ, and then they basically beat the shit out of the kid. Bulldog does as Cornette holds off the referee. I thought this made 1, 2, 3 Kid look like a geek, which was kind of the point. I actually thought this was pretty good foreshadowing, because I can't remember when the actual turn happens, but this seemed like a pretty logical way to keep this building up. But I guess your quick thoughts on the match overall. I gave it a 1.5. Like I said, a pretty good baseline match, and then we can get into the interview segment.
Yeah, standard Raw match. About 1.5 is pretty much what they were, I think, averaging on Raw in '95. They had a lot of marquee matches, but they were all right around this, Ramon versus Tatanka, stuff like that. It's always right in that range. I like the post match a lot. I thought, like you said, Kid looked like a loser. But that ends up being the precipice for the story that's going to behold. I thought Dean Douglas makes a pretty good first impression, costing Razor the match, and then I thought Davey looked really strong. I thought they made him look like a bull in this. He pretty much dominates the majority of the match, and then he just beats the shit out of everyone after. I thought they really made him look pretty strong. So I thought it was good. And Vince also foreshadows. He says later this month. He doesn't specifically call out In Your House, which is only 2 weeks away now, which is funny because, like you said, we've been off for 2 weeks from Raw. He mentions Ramon and Douglas are going to fight. So that pretty much match is already set. So Douglas is here to keep the heat moving. But I went 1.5 too. The match was fine.
And then, so they go to a break right after the finish. We come back. We get the interview segment where Vince interviews Razor and Kid in the ring. Kid says he's pissed at being treated like a kid. He reminds Razor that he beat him once and could again, which I thought was, a nice nod at history. Mm-hmm. And then that sets up Razor versus Kid next week, which I'm looking forward to. And, Razor calls 1, 2, 3 Kid his little buddy, which is, I thought that was a really good line at kind of being, a little condescending towards 1, 2, 3 Kid and give him some ammunition. So, this was a good interview segment, I thought, for all the feuds that'll be developing in the next couple months. Razor, we talked about, he just got inserted into that ladder match. And I thought just with this segment, they kind of ignited a lot of interesting stuff for him. Because now you have the issue with the kid, you have the issue with Douglas. You have kind of still a little bit of an issue with Bulldog if they wanted to go back to that route. So there was kind of a lot of stuff now all of a sudden in the hopper for Razor. So this was a successful first, I'd say, 15, 20 minutes overall. And then, right from there, like you talked about with the pacing, we go right into a preview for next week where Owen and Yokozuna are facing Men on a Mission. So and I guess Cal Ripken's going to have to call in sick again for that one.
No Monday night games.
And that leads right into our first kind of squash that we'll watch here, where it's the Smoking Guns versus Rad Radford and the Brooklyn Brawler.
Still hanging on.
Still. I guess Pat was still around. Nothing to discuss here. So a squash for the Guns, your basic stuff. I'm interested to see kind of when they feel really played out. I thought they still felt, decent and could have served a role here if they were in a feud. Their double team moves look good, but yeah, basic squash. And here's where our grading, I'm sure you'll enjoy, because so you went dud on this. It's a 2-minute match. And as I've discussed, I have very few dud matches,
That's right.
Period. So I did give this the half a star because I did like the double team moves. But, nothing here.
Yeah, Vince wishes Tom Landry happy birthday. That was the big moment of this match. And they also talk up Gorilla Monsoon a lot in this as the fan-friendly interim president. So that had taken hold right after Union House 2 is Tunney's last event as president. So Gorilla came in. He made I know, that feels so old, right? The Tunney hanging on in mid-95.
Yeah.
So Gorilla made the ladder match, Shawn and Razor, and they're really pushing him as the fan-friendly interim president. Doing what he wants to make the fans happy. Bucking the politics is kind of what they were positioning. Like, he doesn't care about the office and whatnot. He's doing what he wants. The Guns, so the tag division as a whole 95 is, again, kind of a weird thing in flux. So the Guns all through, since they debuted in 93, even in 94, they really didn't do anything. Like, they would have matches here and there. They never had a feud. They kind of had this weird little thing with Well Done. And I remember calling it out in a lot of reviews, what are they doing? What's their purpose? They just exist. They're never moving up the ladder. That always confounded me at this time. At some point you have to have some realism, right? So they're just squashing teams for 2 years. Do they ever move up the ladder in any way?
Right.
So then they finally win the tag. They get knocked out of the tag tournament because of Billy Gunn's hand injury. And then they end up winning the titles from Kid and Holly after the Rumble. So now they're kind of, all right, at the forefront of the tag division. They lose to Owen and Yoko, and then, boom, they're right back into kind of doing nothing. And now we'll start to see them kind of get reheated. They fought the Blues at SummerSlam. So it'll be interesting to see where they head and how quickly they heat back up. But they kind of got pushed to the side so Owen and Yoko could dominate the summer as tag champs, which was fine. But, again, they didn't seem to have much room or appetite to have more than one tag team feud going on at this point. It was always whoever is champs and whoever they're feuding with, and all the other teams just kind of wrestle squashes. Or maybe a marquee match on Action Zone, like Guns and Head Drinkers or something. But there's no actual beef going on.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Because the Guns were together as a team for a while, and I don't know where they'll end up on the PTBN tag team list. They'll be one of, I think, the more interesting placements because, they're memorable, but I guess I don't really know how good they were in retrospect. It's something I'm going to have to discover myself. And then we get a Goldust promo. Now, I thought this was interesting. I think this kind of showed us a little more edge creeping into Raw. Because, already with Goldust, he felt kind of groundbreaking. Now, this was, there was some cheesy elements here. He's in this, gold suit in front of, obviously, a
fake Hollywood
projected, green screen of Hollywood. Really bad. But, as far as his, cadence with his promo, it was already pretty down. He had his lines. He was calling out Taker, which I thought was interesting. I I didn't realize that was his first feud coming in. I thought okay. So this may be one of our drop things coming
It could be,
then.
but I'm pretty sure he had called out like other people too, like in the previous week.
Okay.
Like it's one of those things where he's just kind of calling out all the top stars and the big names.
Gotcha.
So I think he eventually works his way up to like Razor or whatever.
Wow.
And his vignette started in the summer, and for a while it was just like the name Goldust written in glitter and like. Fink just saying Goldust, coming soon, and then he first appears, and yes, I think the first time he's in front of like the Hollywood kind of cityscape, and the first time they had the vignette was long, like he talks for a while in the first one, and then now here, did he have the top hat on this one? I forget.
Yes, he did. He had the whole ensemble here.
Yeah. So you could tell they were really trying to make him, and he was trying to make himself stand out. No longer be, Dusty's shadow and all that. So
yeah, creepy character. I mean, I as a kid, I did not know this was Dustin Rhodes.
Oh,
I didn't recognize him. My dad broke kayfabe for me there and ruined my dreams. Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, I had no idea. So I enjoyed this. I thought this was a successful promo. Basic, but certainly somewhat different and to keep an eye on. Go to break, come back. We get a classic match, Isaac Yankem versus Scott Taylor.
Oh, yeah.
Taylor doesn't even get a name graphic here. Yankem feels really dead in the water after the Brett match at SummerSlam, I think.
Which is amazing. It was his first match.
Yeah.
He's already dead.
I don't know how. I mean, I know he's in the Rumble as Isaac Yankem. I don't know how long after that he hangs around. That can't be that long.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much there. I mean, he actually, we'll see another match with him and Brett here in '95. They fight on Raw. That kind of blows off their feud. But yeah, no, he does. It's funny. It was another guy that fucking weeks of. I mean, so many vignettes, pretty much almost from King of the Ring till SummerSlam. Like every week, Lawler's in the dentist office with him.
Right.
But yeah, no, he does. And I will say this though: after watching all the Raws leading up to this one definitely has a fresh feel to it. Like the look, the presentation has shifted a little bit. The roster is a little bit kind of shaken up and refreshed with Bulldog as the heel, Dean Douglas, Isaac Yankem. So even though like he kind of feels dead, on another hand, he also feels it almost feels as part of a refreshing of the roster that we've seen. And I think I probably picked that up more because I watched the whole year. So leading up to this, it's like, okay, now it feels like they're trying to make some moves, but.
Yeah, if this was fresh Yankem, I do not want to see.
You don't want to relive like July.
Yeah, I'm good not going to the build to SummerSlam because he didn't show me a lot here. I ended up winning quarter star. Of course, you went dud. Maybe rightfully so.
Yeah,
and then we get the Todd Pettengill In Your House Control Center. Now this was classic '90s. I don't know how well Pettengill holds up. He is.
Oh, I love these things. I mean, they are dedicated to them since since Gene left in like '93 or whatever. Every pay-per-view, every week has Todd running the matches down in front of the green screen. So, I mean, they've really, they were still in full-on hype mode at this point.
So I love like at the beginning he talks about like mad about you bombing on Sunday night. He says something like, "Oh, NBC must have a lot of faith in that show, huh?" And then he's like, "So order this pay-per-view on Sunday night." It's like, wait a minute, dude, you just like shit on a show being on Sunday night, and now you're wanting us to promote a pay-per-view that's on Sunday night. So like you said, this was kind of our first. This was our first Raw since SummerSlam, and we pretty much get the full card for In Your House. So I'm guessing, with Superstars and Mania or whatever,
Action
they
Zone,
kind of built. Yeah, they built some of this up, but I mean they run down everything. We do get the clip from Superstars of Jean-Pierre Lafitte stealing the glasses from the kid to set up him versus Brett.
Yeah, and some of this stuff, too, had been building even, like, at that time, they would build for months, even if, now they get to it. Like, Jean-Pierre Lafitte had been doing that shit since, like, the summer, like, kind of stealing Brett's jacket and all that stuff. So, like, some of the stuff had already kind of been percolating even before SummerSlam, and they would just get to it now. So that, I mean, we see that with WCW too a lot, where like they'll just kind of drop hints, and then they finally get to it.
Yeah, so I mean, even like Sabio Vega versus Waylon Mercy is announced here.
Right.
So that was kind of interesting that we got the whole pay-per-view card rundown, and now what is it? 3 in your house, 3 or 4 that you defend?
3, because 4.
Okay.
That's this one that I think is not that bad. 4's rough. 4 has some really bad matches on it.
Yeah, the card here looked pretty good.
Yeah,
I would say coming in. I mean, I was actually interested in most. In the Bulldog match, they did say it was him versus Bam Bam.
Yep.
For the pay-per-view, which I don't know if they had an issue or what. That kind of seemed out of the blue a little bit. But
it might have been positioned as because Bigelow's kind of been Diesel's buddy.
Okay.
And it's funny because I am a Bigelow fan, but when you look at him all through '95, I've mentioned this, I think, with Aaron maybe on some of the WWE stuff. Like, I can see why they didn't get behind him. Like, I don't know if it's his height or his look. He just kind of looks like, I don't know. He looks like a goof next to like Diesel and Shawn Michaels, basically. He's like the ugly kid in the neighborhood that's like trying to hang out with like the cool kids, you know?
That might be a little bit of like a King Kong Bundy effect. You know, like in the later, like the King Kong Bundy that you're watching in the Saturday night main event. Like, I mean, like he's pretty good fodder there, but I don't think like Bundy in '88 is, somebody that's ready to run a feud, versus Hogan. So it may
but they felt like they were trying. Like, I feel like they actually got Bigelow to that point, and then they turned him face and just made him Diesel's, goofy little buddy or something. Like, I feel like his top heel run is so quick because he loses to LT, and it almost felt like they had to turn him. But I feel like they had put a lot of work into making him the top guy early in the year, and they blow off. They have him and Diesel on Raw, and then he turns face. Like, maybe they should have saved that for a couple of pay-per-views, and then turn him. He just gets lost so quick because he turns like right when Shawn turns, and it's like, well, he's not going to out-pop Shawn. There's like no way.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, how did they really build up that was an embarrassing loss to LT?
Yeah,
did. See, that's a problem. Okay, so that's just
and like
sort of
DiBiase, the corporation, like running it in, rubbing it in.
Yeah. Oh God.
Right.
You're booking the show, but yeah, all right. And then we get now Barry Dudinski.
Yes,
I did not remember this guy.
Oh, Big Barry. He's been around for a while now. I think for most of the summer, maybe even earlier than that. Might have been like since like Mania time. He's like I don't know if they're trying to promote the live-ish nature of it. So like they would do a lot of like order now, like, and they would have a lot of it was actually kind of a cool idea. They'd have like unique merchandise available, like just tonight kind of stuff. Like, here's this special deal we're having just tonight. If you call during Raw, you get this Shawn Michaels hat and sunglasses or whatever.
Well, it was unique.
Yeah,
it was certainly that.
But yeah, he's got some energy to him, Barry.
Yeah, it was an interesting look, but him and Todd back to back was quite a 1-2 punch.
Yes, the 1-2 kings of the '90s. We just see Charlie Min in there from the late '94. But I never begrudged them for the way they went about this because I'm like, all right, they're kind of taking the opportunity. It's a down lull. He's not really wasting time because usually he's in the aisle if someone's coming out. And he's just like real quick shilling some merch. So, even if they sold 50 of these things, like during Raw, like however many people were watching, right? Like couple million people or whatever were watching. If they sell 50 to 100 of these things, it's probably worthwhile, right?
Yeah. I mean, it didn't bother me.
Yeah.
It was definitely very 90s.
I mean, do you think anyone called and ordered? I mean, someone had to, right?
Oh, yeah, sure. Right. I mean, come on. I will tell you, like, this
Scott,
is road.
Scott definitely called and ordered this shit, right?
A merchandise piece I always wanted was like around WrestleMania 12 when they cut up the ring in those little squares.
Oh, yeah.
And sold the plaque. I always wanted that. I asked my mom for it, and she rejected me on that one. But I always thought that was a cool merchandise. The HBK pleather cap with sunglasses, heart shape, not so much. But, Yeah, $25. I guess that's not outrageous. We get a quick Shawn promo to head us to break, and then we come back, and it's our main event, which is Shawn Michaels versus Sid. This is kind of the SummerSlam match we missed out on.
Thankfully.
Sid, he does feel pretty checked out here. DiBiase feels like a ghost. I don't. Please don't tell me this is him rejuvenated. Cause
no, he is fading. I mean, he's clearly being faded out. It's right around now is where he's like done, and Cornette is being pushed as now as the main heel manager. I mean, Cornette's always kind of been up there, but since SummerSlam 94, pretty much for that year, 94 to 95 SummerSlams, was DiBiase. It was like the kingpin of the managers. And with Bulldog turning heel, Sid pretty much vanquished. Tatanka somehow still hanging on as a relic. Like all these guys, the corporation feels like so played out. Like they're in issues with Henry Godwin. It's like it's not going well for them. Sid is done. He's clearly not giving a shit anymore, and it's just going to get worse from here for him. This is pretty much like his last gasp of any kind of big match, other than like a Survivor Series or something like that.
Yeah, so this is kind of a preview of a main event feud we'll see a whole year in 2 months from now. But I never thought I'd think DiBiase with the Steiner brothers would look cool, but watching him here, he looked really bad. I like this match kind of. I mean, it's pretty good. I think Shawn in '95. I've talked about this somewhat, but Shawn Michaels is an in-ring performer. I'm not that fond of his 93 when he's pudgy. His 94 is good, but inconsistent because he's out with the injury or whatever for so long. He does a lot. I remember when I watched the yearbook for 94, it seemed like he was mostly doing Heartbreak Hotel stuff. I don't know. He definitely has some peaks, but it felt inconsistent. So in 95, it feels like he's really starting to become a strong performer in ring when he turns face. I know with 96, when I watched the pay-per-view matches from that year, I love his matches. I don't know if I love the persona, which most people didn't, even in real time. Or he certainly got backlash from that, but just with this match, I mean, like he plays his role really well. He does get the crowd behind him more than I'd say anybody else on the show. Like Razor got a fine reaction, but I think Shawn feels like the most fresh.
For sure.
Person on the roster here,
and he does like a lot of comedy stuff too. In '95, like the first 5 to 7 minutes of his matches always feel like, he'll slide out of the ring. Preen to the fan. Like when Cornette's out there, he'll slide out, slap Cornette in the ass with a tennis racket, come back in, lay across the top rope, stomp on the guy's hands, poke him the eye. Like a lot of that kind of like almost, I don't know if it's Memphis-y, but whatever, that shticky kind of, I don't know, call it lame, but like very cheesy humor. He works that in a lot during this face stretch here. Like the first 5 minutes or so of his matches always have that, and then they kind of get cranking.
Yeah. One spot that I liked in this match was he starts his comeback and Sid hits a really good choke slam. That was probably the best move that Sid executes throughout the match. But, I mean, HBK ends up making his comeback in earnest. It's the Sweet Chin music.
3 of them.
Pretty much exterminates Sid from contention at the top of the card. So, I gave this one 2 1/4. I thought it was pretty good. I mean, decent.
It's all Shawn. I mean, it's pretty much all Shawn other than that choke slam. DiBiase looks so sad at ringside, too, when Sid loses. He's like, oh, God.
Yeah, he's done.
But Sid looks like, Sid is such a loser in 95. Like he came in hot, and then he, at Mania, he's kind of cool, and then he kills Shawn, and then right at In Your House 1, everything turns. Like, he gets DQ'd there, he runs away at King of the Ring, loses clean, then he's not even good enough to keep his match at SummerSlam. Like, he's just such a bum, and then here he loses,
that's bad.
Fucking loses again. And DiBiase is so sick of him at this point. He's just like, oh God, get the fuck out, go home, just go home, killing me. But this to me just felt very paint by numbers. Like, it was very obvious. Like, Sid wasn't going to win this match. which again probably added to a little bit of the staleness of Raw versus Nitro. And obviously we'll talk about Nitro and how it relates to this match in particular a little bit later. But I went 2 on this. It just felt like a very, antiseptic Shawn match, which is not good during the stretch. Like if that's all you can get out of him, it's probably time to walk away, Sid.
So they kind of put a bow on the show with Shawn stripping. Go to break. We get a quick interview with Shawn and Diesel, hamming it up. This wasn't nothing memorable. It was kind of the dudes with attitudes. They name dropped that and kind of set up the pay-per-view. But right. then, now this was odd. So they showed clips from next week's match.
Yes.
They showed clips from the Owen-Yokozuna versus Men on a Mission match. Basically not shying away from the fact that this is a tape show. So that
not
was kind of... That was a little, maybe a little bit of a cagey move, knowing they were going to go against a live Nitro.
Yeah, they pretty much really started owning it and saying, you know what? Yeah, we're taped, and they would do that a lot. Like even during the show, they would start showing like clips for later tonight. Like they'd show a clip of the actual match. So yeah, they were pretty much just stepping up, and I don't think Watts had shown up yet. But it made me wonder, like, if that was some of his fingerprints on something like this too. Like, it felt kind of like Mid-Southie in a way. Like, we're just showing that it's a taped package, and here's what happened on this night that we taped. It's not live, so it's interesting, and it's funny because in my memory, I always had this thought that they showed Raw, they had replays of Raw during this time, like they'd replay it on a Thursday night, and we could not find any remnants of that. But during the 9/18 Raw, which we'll see next week, Vince actually says that was a special Thursday night edition. So I wondered, like in the back of my mind, if that was the Thursday replay thing I had, like kind of changed, twisted in my head to that. But as part of that, I always remember them, showing the preview of next week and later in the night, which I thought was interesting.
So I guess, do we want to go through our categories for Raw?
Yeah, I guess we may as well because we're here, so we may as well do it.
Okay. So for Match of the Night, we both had Shawn versus Sid.
Yep.
Now for our kind of segment slash, I guess,
segment
your
of the
spot
night.
Segment, something outside of that. We both did the Ramon Kid Douglas segment for that. And here's where we have a slight differentiation. MVP. Now you went with the bad guy, Rozzero Ramon. I went with Shawn. I mean, again, I think those were the two most prominent people on the show, and probably the two people that got the best reaction. So either one of those two are fine.
And talking through it again, maybe Bulldog could have been in contention too, because I kind of forgot what a beast he looked like. But I liked Ramon because I liked the match, and then I really liked the interview with Kid. I thought Ramon was really good in that interview. So that kind of put him over Shawn for me in this.
Now, commentary line, I did say the commentary was good, but nothing really stood out besides the pooper scooper line for me. Now, we do have this category called Shots Fired, and this is where they kind of, fire a shot across the bow to the opposition. And, we really didn't have anything overtly from Raw here, and I do think this is going to be more one-sided with Nitro towards Raw.
Yeah.
And at least till we get to the Billionaire Ted stuff. I mean, maybe showing the clips from next week is like a slight shots fired. I mean, that's kind of like a slight counter programming tactic that I think was purposeful. And then we basically, we didn't get any debuts here for the promotion. We can't have any dropped angles because it's the first week.
Yep.
And our final grade, we both went 5 out of 10, which I think is fair. I mean, this to me felt like a baseline Raw where, I enjoyed myself, but nothing was too extraordinary at all. So, a good baseline Raw to start us off.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, 5 out of 10. Made a lot of sense. We had some angle progression, decent matches for Raw at this point. And it did feel a little bit fresh to me because I had been coming off that stretch of blasé Raw. So it was good to see. So, all right. So why don't you just want to go right into Nitro?
Want to go to Nitro or we want to take a break? Are we breaking programming.
We're breaking programming. We're going
not doing a break.
We're going right to Nitro. We're skipping the breaks on this.
We're live, pal.
We're cutting edge, just like the Monday Night Wars. We're breaking breaking the molds.
So Nitro. I mean, Vader's still in the opening. Pyro. They did have pyro on Raw. It was kind of the dingy, basic fireworks above the ring.
Mm-hmm.
The pyro for Nitro is certainly more extravagant than Raw. And we got our first, my first Mongo comment where we hear, this is the biggest thing to hit TV because the little old lady said, where's the beef?
Yes, obviously.
Now, I think I'm going to be a Mongo apologist.
I'm right with you.
I don't
I love
know
Mongo.
why. And I think I realized that he reminds me a lot of my father-in-law watching these shows, because my father-in-law has kind of the sayings like that, like the infamous apropos or whatever from the first Nitro.
I'm not talking about farming implements, baby.
Yeah. So, and my father-in-law's like that, where sometimes he'll have sayings, and you're kind of like, I don't know where you were going with there, but okay. So then we get clips from last week. Vader is AWOL. Now this was a weird, this is a real life situation of Vader leaving the company, but them deciding to call him AWOL was an interesting choice. It was kind of like
he just left. They're basically saying he abandoned ship right before the
abandoned
war.
ship. It's kind of like when they say now, like, the title's in abeyance. It's like,
right.
Why do they pick AWOL? But that definitely gets driven home throughout the night, that Vader is AWOL, and that's probably one of the big threads running through this entire show. And then, this was the same place they did Clash of the Champions 2, this
Miami.
arena, the Knight Center in Miami, which I looked it up, and if you, Google image, this is like a theater, where you'd see plays and stuff. And the way they set it up is interesting, because you can't really tell that. Once you know that, and you kind of look at it when they do the shots where they're facing the entrance, you can see it more. But it was kind of odd and strange that they were in, pretty tiny arena. I mean, it's like 3,000, 4,000 capacity.
Right. It's interesting. It would be interesting how quickly they move up, and I don't think it's too long before they start hitting bigger places. But you always think of Nitro as being in major arenas. Like, you never picture Nitro in kind of I picture Raw and smaller stuff, because they were for a lot of 94 and 95. But you don't picture Nitro being in a place like that. Like, I always think of it as being just grandiose arenas, which is pretty much where they are, or outside or whatever.
And then that leads us into our first match, Sabu versus Alex Wright. Now, this is Sabu's debut. I thought this was a cagey match to go out first.
Oh, yeah.
Sabu certainly is different, very dynamic, and this match kind of plays into that. I mean, Sabu does a lot here that certainly look more state-of-the-art than Raw's offerings for those two matches. I mean, Raw had 2 squashes and 2 solid but pretty unspectacular matches that followed a basic storyline. This kind of threw that out the window real quick.
Right.
Sabu diving into the guardrail, and we get a table breaking at the finish, after the finish. But Alex Wright, I thought, looked pretty good. Kind of being the base for Sabu on his athletic spots, and also throwing in some pretty impressive spots of his own. He does a good drop kick to the outside where he hits the floor, and then he gets really big height on a missile drop kick. So I was impressed with him. One thing I noticed aesthetically was they still had the different mat for Nitro. The ring apron for this Nitro was where you it's a see-through, the Nitro letters are cut out.
Yeah, it's clear.
See-through. Yeah. And they have a spotlight or something that shines through it from under the ring. Now, obviously, as we progress in this, you're going to see a lot of people hiding under the ring for Nitro. So they had to stop that quickly. But that was interesting here. So what did you think about this match in our first look at Sabu?
I liked it. I thought it was good. I love, excuse me, Mongo calling Wright a German dynamo made me laugh. But right away, Sabu's manic pace and energy were where it just stands out, like you said, compared to Raw. Like, it was a good fit for, okay, we have this live energy, this live show, everyone's fired up, and here comes Sabu just stalking around like an animal. And I thought Wright hung right with him. Like, it was almost one of those sneaky ones where you expect Sabu to be the guy who steals the show, but Wright almost took it right from under him. I thought he looked really good. He hung with Sabu every step of the way. I like the superplex that Wright did. I thought that was really good. And his German suplex was good, too. And I thought Wright looked legit throughout this. Like, Sabu is a guy, I don't know how familiar like you were with him at this point. I was not watching any ECW.
Yeah,
and I was
never seen him.
Right, and I wasn't on the internet yet, really. I didn't get on, like, AOL till 96. So I was working off of, hearing about Sabu and, like, PWI and shit like that. So I hadn't really seen much of him at all. So I remember it being like, whoa, it's a real strong debut for a guy that people may have heard of but never seen. And then you get the table spot, but I hated that reverse DQ at the end. Like, I thought that was real lame. I hate when they do that shit. Like, the match is over. It's over. Like, let it go. But I thought that made Sabu look good, and kudos to Wright for taking it. Like, I thought this overall was a good... And Wright's a guy, too, that as we go through, like, I think he's kind of underrated historically. Like, he's always pretty good in the ring. I think we'll see that going forward, but I like him as a worker overall.
Yeah, I agree.
So, yeah. So I went... what did I go on this? 1.5.
Okay, yeah, I went a star and 3/4, so we're pretty close.
Yeah,
that reverse. I do hate that reverse decision where they call the DQ, because it's like, what if somebody gets attacked in the back, then you can just change the. It makes no sense, and it's not consistent. Like you said, the match is over, it's done. You can fine him or whatever, but to reverse the decision is really lame.
And I think so far, like, if I had to compare this match to what we've seen, like, even though I went higher grade on Sean Sid, I think I actually liked it better. Like, I enjoyed watching it more than Sean Sid, which felt like Sean Sid felt technically better, like, just fine, but this was, like, much more fun and exciting to watch than Sean Sid.
Yeah, this was very frantic. This whole show, like I said, like, the Raw was easy to get through, but, it was kind of like like we talked about. It felt kind of like an Allentown, like 1984 style show. This felt very frantic, like this whole show. So that was all the first segment. We come back from break. We get a Flair interview with Mean Gene. Talks about how close him and Arn used to be. And then he kind of makes a weird analogy off of that, where he says like he was the Joe Montana and Arn was the LT, which I kind of I get what he's saying as far as the personality types and those two athletes, but
so is he saying Arn's like a big cokehead rapist, whatever the fuck else?
And also, was Joe Montana and LT really tight? I don't think weren't they like enemies with each other?
Yeah, it was a weird comparison.
It was kind of a little bit of a weird analogy there, but then we get Luger interrupting, and Flair basically has an orgasm over his body. He knows all his measurements and is really. Got the googly. It's like Bobby Heenan 93 Rumble levels.
I picture Flair just in the back, like, let me measure your arms, big man. You got the tape measure out.
And I like Luger. I'm a Luger apologist, but I like his demeanor around this point where, all he says is, some things never change and you're too much, and then just leaves, which I thought was funny. And that interview segment I thought was pretty good. We get the preview for the match at Fall Brawl between Flair and Arn, and then we get some development with what's going on with Luger. That leads us right into Sting versus VK Wall Street.
I think our first official maybe shot fired here, right? Is
definitely
VK Wall Street? Yeah.
Definitely. Well, yeah. VK. We get 2 shots fired here, right?
Yeah, we got a couple, but this is the first one.
Yes. So we get a lot of talk about the VK name. Where does that come from? Bobby, do you know what VK stands for? All this stuff.
One of my favorite running themes too for Nitro is like Bischoff and eventually Tony a little bit, like trying to like needle WWF and Bobby just wanted nothing to do with it. Like, he just has no interest at all in, like, shitting. Like, I feel like deep down, like, he obviously, he said it before, he never wanted to leave. Like, I think he loved the WWF, he didn't even want to be in WCW. And he probably was thinking, like, he may go back someday, so, like, I am not burning any bridges to fucking, play Eric's little game here. So, like, it becomes a real running theme where Bischoff will take shots at WWF and, like, Bobby just sits quietly, just ignores them.
Yeah, we'll have to keep that in mind, because Mongo has no problem.
Oh yeah, he'll dive right in.
Shitting on WWF, even though he was featured at WrestleMania 11 or whatever. But yeah, we do get our first Where the Big Boys Play counter here, which
yes.
I am counting.
Nice.
And we get a good many. We get 2 in this match. I'll just go ahead and say, actually probably 2.5, because Mongo does a quasi one, like he says something like the lines of, well, BK's here where the big boys are playing now, so it's close. But
what did you think of VK going here at this point? Because he felt, as IRS, he felt so, like, done. Like, I mean, he was in WWF for 4 years as IRS. I mean, he came in the spring of '91. And he was on TV a fucking ton. I mean, he's on every pay-per-view. He's on, like, every Raw. I mean, he gets a ton of TV time. And by the time he leaves, it's like, oh my god, this guy's like old as shit. But then he comes here and he's kind of pushed again, like, I don't know, like almost like a big debut. Like, when he's kind of got his old Wall Street gimmick back. And I know he doesn't go very far, but it kind of felt weird that they were using him as like a, I know it was kind of to needle Vince, but in a way it almost feels like, oh god, really?
Well, and he got the promo the week before.
Right, yeah, that's
too.
It.
He's a weird case, because it's like, on one hand, he feels done, so it's like, well, what else could he do? Could he be a manager? Could he be a commentator? No, he doesn't really, to me, have the personality for either of those. So, I just think he probably should have been done as a performer, or at best, pretty much enhancing talent, like on Saturday night or main event.
Which I think is what he gets to pretty quick.
Yeah, he goes to that pretty quick, because he... during this match, he doesn't have a ton of heat put on him, and he looks pretty cooked here. The VK Wall Street gimmick overall, even though it needles at Vince, is kind of straight out of the York Foundation playbook.
It's very really early dated. 90s, like Gordon Gekko, and late 80s, like that kind of stuff. Like that, the Wall Street thing wasn't as big of a deal. The crash had happened. I don't know. Like, by this point, it's like, all right. Like, everyone's kind of past Wall Street. It wasn't like a hot topic, I don't think, as much in the mid-'90s as it was in the '80s and early '90s. I'm surprised they didn't make him some kind of like I don't say judge, but something to like goad Vince on the steroid trial. Like go all the way instead of VK Wall Street, like whatever VK Courthouse. I don't know, like something more like because we've had the IRS thing, and Vince did the IRS thing to kind of poke fun at them, and you think it would have been more like taking a shot at Vince's like legal issues, like me as a lawyer instead of Wall Street. Yeah,
that could have worked. Who knows? And then, so do we want to talk about? I guess then we also get Bischoff. He just gives the spoilers.
He just unloads the Uzi. So he says, in case you're tempted to grab the remote and check out the competition, don't bother. It's 2 or 3 weeks old. Shawn Michaels beats the big guy with a super kick that couldn't even earn a green belt at the YMCA. Stay right here. It's live. So, this is like, boom, like dick on the table. Just like, fuck you. like we're not here to like ignore you like you ignore us. We're coming right at you.
And as we talked about earlier, right off the heels of that, Mongo says that, they named their show after uncooked eggs, but this show sizzles, period. So he shits right on.
I love Mongo, but my God, he is like the cheesiest fucking...
Uncooked eggs, raw.
Wouldn't you say meat? I don't know. I guess raw eggs.
I don't think I would go with meat, but
we're gonna get salmonella, baby. We're gonna be our proteins coming in nice and cooked.
So we didn't talk much about this match. There's not much to it.
I thought Sting looked good. I thought he looked pretty crisp. Yeah.
Now even when I watched the first Nitro, him versus Flair. Now I thought he looked good there, and Sting has I did notice, I did say Shawn got a good reaction, but this also plays into the difference in the crowd because, I think Sting got as good a reaction as Shawn.
Yeah.
On Raw. So, this does show, Sting is very popular still around this point, even in 95, and this is right before he started letting his hair grow out. He's still pretty much Surfer Sting.
And he's been below Hulk.
For a little bit.
He's been below Hulk now for a year. He's been kind of 1A.
Savage, too. It's very, he's fighting for kind of value, and he's still been over. So that's good. But yeah, the match, I went 3/4 of a star. It wasn't much to it, but Sting wins, so
I thought Sting looked pretty good. It was basically a semi-squash. Wall Street gets a little bit. I will give him this. I think Wall Street looked a little bit rejuvenated in the match, compared to the last few times I saw him on Raw. I thought he looked a little bit better, so I'll give him that. He seemed like he had a little bit more energy to him.
So the next segment, we learned Disco Inferno's debuting on Saturday night, so he can't even make it on Raw. And then we get Scott Norton versus Randy Savage. Now, this is kind of, to me, this felt straight out of the Raw playbook when they first started, how Savage had that personal feud with Repo Man. Here we go. Savage.
First ever comparison. Will just fell out of his fucking recliner, comparing Scott Norton to fucking Barry Darsow.
Well, it just seems like these random kids that put Savage in when you want to kickstart a show. But Savage is wearing green like his partner Sting in War Games, so there's solidarity on that front. By
the way, the AWOL thing, I guess we didn't piece that together too. They're playing up the war.
Talk about this.
Yeah, they're playing up the war thing for War Games, right? So that's the AWOL, the Army theme that they got going on. So I guess that probably explains that.
They kept going with that narrative, but there was a lot of warfare analogies, and AWOL was the most prominent. So I like this match. I really like this match actually.
Yeah.
I like Scott Norton. I think his power moves. I thought we talked about Bulldog. I think looked good as a heel, as a beast, but I thought Norton actually looked better probably of the two shows as kind of the beefy heel here because he throws a lot. Savage throws a lot at him, but Norton's pretty resilient. The implant DDT back inside from Norton was great. The power slam was great.
It was ugly in a good way.
Yeah, he was very violent throughout this match. Norton goes up top and Savage drove his face to the mat, which usually is a spot that doesn't look very good, but I thought they made that look pretty good here. We get a terrible call from Mongo where he says, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star" from that. That was awful. Totally, not on point with the peak moment and intensity of the match. Then the finish again is lame, where Savage starts his comeback, and here comes Shark and Kamal out from the Dungeon of Doom. Eric calls him Avalanche. Oh, here's the Avalanche. No.
And he had been Shark for a little bit, at least, right? Since the summer.
Yeah. I don't know if he changed the tiger tattoo into a Shark yet, but yeah, he was definitely Shark for a minute.
Yeah.
And then this finish was so contrived.
Oh, so bad.
So yeah, this brings it down because I was ready to call this our first hidden gem match, and the finish. I like the match for the time it went, but yeah, the finish hurt it. Where Savage gets a elbow drop, but he's already laid out Shark, so Shark is laid out on Norton's legs when Savage pins him, and then the referee just counts. That made no sense to me. You have somebody literally a 500-pound fat piece, laying on somebody else, and you still count the pinfall. It made no sense. But
lay it out like he's laying on a couch.
Yeah, and I understand what they were trying to do to keep Norton looking strong. This fat dude had to lay on him, or he might have kicked out of the elbow.
Well, then he gets right up right after. He just rolls Shark off.
Yeah. He no sells it. I mean, it just looks so contrived.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Zodiac and Taskmaster and everybody hits the ring. So yeah, the finish was bad. I ended up going 2 1/4 for this match, though, which is what I rank Sid and Sean as well. But I do think of the two shows, this actually was probably my favorite match of the of both shows.
Yeah, it was good. Norton, like you mentioned, a lot of his power offense. It's a good clash with Savage or mesh with Savage, whose selling is always on point. So his selling was really good here. That DDT looked like it hurt like hell. I mean, that was ugly. And there's a good Mongo line in here, which was my favorite of the night. Sullivan comes in with a staff, and he goes, "What's that guy doing? Trying to turn him into a popsicle?"
Yeah, he does say that. Oh, Mongo's the best.
Oh, God.
He is gold.
Dungeon of Doom. I mean, yeah, they feel, again, very old for, like, late 95 at this point. I mean, just edging on. I mean, they're almost done. They're pretty much almost done.
And Sullivan is the mouthpiece or ringleader, taskmaster, whatever. I mean, he never felt intimidating to me, even as a kid.
Because he's so short. You can say it.
Yeah, and I mean, then the mind game aspect never felt
right.
Yeah, it just never worked. I always hated this. Like,
I mean, maybe like in Florida when he was doing the cult stuff, that was like legit scary.
Yeah.
Like that's one thing, but this is like, oh, these mind games. Look, here's a Brutus Beefcake with paint on his face. You know, like here you go. Here's a giant shark. I don't know. It just felt, yes, it wasn't
so cheesy.
They didn't do anything particularly dastardly. Like they never really got. No. They never really got anything in that would prove them to be like a top level heel stable.
Right. So that was that match. It was fun. You know, if you're gonna watch both these shows, I'd say if you're gonna watch just a few things from both these shows, this is probably a match worth watching.
If you're into guys becoming popsicles, this is your match.
Yeah, there you go. Segment 4 was really quick, where we just get a Fall Brawl preview, Lex's entrance, and another Where the Big Boys Play counter. So we're up to number 3. Now, this Fall Brawl preview, they say it benefits MDA, which is good, but there's like no disconnect. There was such disconnect. You know what I mean? Like, they were like, oh, this, order this pay-per-view to support MDA and see Hulk Hogan versus the Dungeon of Doom. I mean, I didn't understand, like, what, I don't know. It was very odd, like, the way it was set up, just like the quick promo. I thought that was strange.
Yeah.
And then we go straight into Luger versus Hogan. Now, do you think, like, they didn't expect Luger to come in and they, knew the plans for what was going to be happening with Hogan and the Giant coming up? Is that the reason why we didn't get this on pay-per-view?
I think they were just
trying to... I thought it was odd.
I think they were just trying to put a big match against the first head-to-head with Raw. Like, Luger shows up, and, the story goes that Bischoff didn't really even want him. Like, Sting kind of went to bat for him. So maybe they weren't picturing, like, giving him a mega push. So they're like, you know what? We already got Hogan kind of planned out for other things. We need a big hook for the first head-to-head. Yeah, we got the first week solo. Next week we got some competition. Let's make sure. So I think the Hogan-Luger match existed as a, major hook to watch Nitro over Raw. That's my guess. Because, that match never happened, so it's kind of a dream match.
Right. Yeah. This is a legit, like, first-time match. And, yeah, we get it on the second Nitro here. So as far as this match, just a couple quick notes. It's a pretty basic. To me, this felt like the first 5 to 7 minutes of a match they could have had on pay-per-view.
Right.
They do the filling out. Hogan does a little offense with the drop toe hold, some wrestling, grabs a hammerlock.
And Bischoff mentions too that Lex had been wrestling for the WWF title just a few weeks ago.
Right. Yeah. So another mini shot there.
Yeah.
And now Luger was getting a lot of cheers here. I don't know if that's just the freshness of Luger being in the promotion or, Hulk being so played out. Yeah. And Eric, for his credit, doesn't shy away from that and says, they are cheering for Lex. Luger gets Hogan up in the torture rack. Randy Anderson was the referee here. which, as we'll get way down the line in 97, I got kind of PTSD thinking about Randy Anderson ringing the bell from the 100th Nitro. So that was kind of cool. And another lame finish, though. This was, we had 4 matches on this show, and 3 finishes were pretty bad here.
And Luger was supposed to lose clean. I mean, they were pretty much about to job him out.
Yeah,
and then
I mean, so Hulk's up. Luger has him in the torture rack and then lets go, which is pretty dumb.
Right.
He does at least go for the pin after celebrating for 10 seconds, but he still kind of looked like a goof. Hogan, of course, kicks out of that. Hulk's up, drops the leg, and, is going for the count as the Dungeon of Doom runs in for the DQ. Pretty lame finish. I ended up going, 1.5 stars on this? What's your kind of thoughts and rating on this one?
So I went 1 star. I did not really enjoy this. I thought it was kind of blah. I thought despite the hype and the matchup on paper, it was disappointing. I hated the finish. Luger, for a guy, like you said, his character is really interesting this time. But for a guy you'd think would be trying to make a big impression, he doesn't look very motivated. He's not really busting ass here at all. And I know part of that's Hogan that he's working with, so maybe he felt like he didn't have to. But I don't know. For a guy that was so disenfranchised with the WWF, he walked out, shows up here, kind of lucks into a deal because his buddy goes to bat for him, and then he comes out here, gets a big match, and just kind of goes through the motions a bit. Also, Hogan, to me, I think he just looks awful here. He's so skinny, and look, I get it. He's off the roids, good for him health-wise, but he looks like shit. I just, the thick eyebrows, the balding stands out more. He just looks so emaciated, and he just doesn't look nearly as good as he used to. And I know he turns that around soon, but for right now, I don't know. He just isn't Hogan to me.
Well, this is literally the last time we'll get, Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky Hogan from this run.
Right.
Because he's about to enter that weird period where he's ripping up observers and that
dark Steve Willie period.
Yeah. And then we that kind of leads right up to the turn, when he disappears. So this is really kind of the last beacon of a light for the Hulkamania type Hogan.
Right.
But yeah, he, as somebody, when I was born, I was late to the Hulkamania game. Mm-hmm. So even in 91 through 93, I was still very much on the Hogan bandwagon. By 95, that was definitely wavering. I was losing interest pretty quickly around this time. So he's kind of on his last legs. And then I guess we can talk about the last segment is Mean Gene interviewing Hogan, Luger, Savage, and Sting.
Get used to this. This becomes a thing for a while.
Everybody yelling at each other.
Yeah. And Hogan and Savage want to know why the Dungeon of Doom didn't touch Lex, and where's he coming from, brother? Are you straight up? Whose side are you on? All this shit we're going to hear a million times between now and the end of the year. They just keep the same thing over and over. These 3 guys get interviewed by Gene, or 4 guys, and what side are you on? Are you with Luger? Are you with are you with Sting? Who are you with? And then so it Hogan here is at his absolute fucking worst. He is thin, worn out, played out. The crowd's turning on him, and his overacting is so fucking bad. The way he swings his head and looks to the crowd and, should we trust them, brothers? It's just so fucking hackney-eyed. It's just, oh God, it's awful. And I blame Mr. fucking Nanny. I feel like he was not like this before Mr. Nanny, and then Mr. Nanny flipped the switch and he became super, he had to be this over-the-top cheeseball. It's so on display here, and it's in a lot of 95 WCW. But here it's really, really there. So Sting and Jimmy Hart convince him to allow Luger to join the squad. Savage is against it. He doesn't trust Lex. They want to know why the Dungeon didn't touch Lex. So a lot of back and forth. But I thought Savage was really good, and it just shows you the difference. You have Hogan who's overacting, comes off so fake, and Savage is just this real intense ball of energy that just feels so real. It's this weird counterbalance. And Savage, I thought, saved this segment because he's really on point, locked in. You believe him. You believe he really doesn't trust Lex. He's pacing around. He doesn't trust anyone. and you got Hogan doing his friggin', Kukla Fran and Ali routine. Just like, yeah, I mean, basically out of 1940s fucking vaudeville or whatever. It's just so friggin' demonstrative and just over the top. And even I meant to mention this before when we saw the clip from the Nitro the week before, my stinky palm. What is your palm stinky? My palms never stink. What is that fucking about? I don't get it. I don't know. It's such a weird thing to say. Everything's always stinky with him, as we'll see as we move forward. But I hate put your stinky palm in my hand, brother. Is he does he picture guys as raking piles of shit all day or something?
I don't know.
Stink? It's an odd thing to say. Anyway, I'm very anti late night, and actually I had this argument with Nick Duke, I think it was last week. He's defending this era of Hogan, but I'm sorry. I can get behind most Hogan, but this Hogan I cannot get behind.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Hogan's good here. I may not hate him as much as it sounds like you do, but I mean, he's certainly not good. I did like Savage calling out Jimmy Hart.
Yeah.
Jimmy was very pissed that his name got thrown into the fray, because he's sort of just standing in the background. And Savage is like, well, he did touch Jimmy. And Jimmy's like, wait a minute, guys, what are you? He's like,
drag me into
talking about? Yeah. And then, so they say, it comes down to Hogan, right? They're like, you're the one, you're the decider vote or whatever. But isn't the vote already 2-1?
Well, Hogan's the captain, I guess, right? So
okay, but Sting and Jimmy are 4, and Savage is a kid, so it's 2-1. So I mean, what if Hogan would have said no? Then wouldn't it have been 2-2? But
stalemate. Well, maybe that's why it's a deciding vote. So either the tiebreaker or Lex gets in.
All right, but so we do have our War Games team. I mean, as a lead-in into the pay-per-view, this was the very last thing. I didn't think this was atrocious. I mean, this Fall Brawl 95 was not a pay-per-view I watched live, but
well, I'll give him
I mean, it was okay.
They had to add some ambiguity, so I think it was actually kind of shrewd making Luger the ambiguous point, because no one in their right mind thought the Dungeon of Doom was going to win that match. I mean, this team is fucking loaded.
Yeah, come on.
I mean, Hogan, Savage, and Sting could have just went 3-on-4 and still been heavily favored. So I think they had that ambiguity of Vader. That was kind of the build a little bit to that match originally.
Right.
Can they trust Vader? So he's out, and they put Luger in. So now the question is, will Luger swing the balance, or is he really with Hogan? So I thought it was kind of smart, actually, the way they did it, because they added a little bit of question to the match, at least.
Yeah. And that's our show. So let's go into our awards here. Now, for match of the night, you went with Sabu and Alex Wright, correct?
Yeah, I just really liked that match. It was a lot of fun. I love Sabu's energy. I'm an Alex Wright fan. I thought he shined. I liked everything right up until the finish I liked. And I thought they started off Nitro with a real bang by having Sabu. It was like, boom, we're coming out of the gate hot. Here's Sabu, this highly talked about guy from around the Indies, and we have him here and you don't.
Okay, for segment, what did you choose there?
I went with the interview at the end with Hogan, Savage, Sting, and Luger. I thought that was, probably the crux of the show. I thought it was the most important part of the show. Narrowly edging out, I thought Flair's interview was really good earlier. They're close, but I like the end only because of the ridiculousness of the, whose side are you on, and all. And I thought Savage was really good in that too.
Yeah, I ended up going with Flair's interview. The ending, I don't know. It just, I guess it just seemed like there was too much. I mean, what did Luger? I don't know. A lot of it seemed very too anxious. What did Luger had done to cause this much distrust? The guy just showed up.
Right.
I guess past history, but come on now. I mean, he slammed Yokozuna. He's a good guy now.
Proved himself to be a true American.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like Savage has a clean record exactly in his wrestling history. So let's let bygones be bygones, guys.
I guess part of it here is what the Dungeon didn't touch him, and he's challenging Hogan for the belt.
That was a decent. I probably should rewatch that attack to make sure they didn't touch him, because that was a pretty good moment they entered in, that he didn't touch Luger and Jimmy Hart, which is interesting. Where they end up going with that. It was pretty good. Mm-hmm. Pretty good foresight there. MVP, I kind of went with the odd choice. I was riding the Norton bandwagon throughout this show. I just thought, you think of Scott Flash Norton, you don't think, I don't know. I mean, but I felt like in the ring with Savage, he hung with him. You know, he didn't look out of place, and I really enjoyed that match. Probably overselling it a bit, but I enjoyed the match for what it was, and I thought he kind of elevated his spot there. Who did you go for MVP?
Sabu. I think he's my Scardor for this night. I just thought he stood out above pretty much everyone. He felt like a force of nature coming in there. Just kind of took over the proceedings and, again, started the show off hot. So I really liked him on this night. I enjoyed that match.
And we've talked about the shots fired and the infamous Mongo commentary.
Yep.
We got 2 debuts this show, which we talked about, was Sabu and VK Wall Street. One was more successful than the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And for our final grade, we both ended up going 5.5, which...
Yeah, it felt like slightly better than Raw. Like, pretty close, but I thought this accomplished a little bit more and had the better matches. I will say I had the worst commentary, mainly because Bischoff. Like, I did not enjoy Bischoff at this point. I thought Bobby was fine, and Mongo obviously is funny, but I thought Vince and King are much smoother. Vince is so much better at moving the show along. I really dug their performance better than the Nitro one. So that, to me, was a benefit of Raw.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like the pacing of Nitro better, and I like the crowd better. Those are probably the two, I guess, most obvious reasons in why I gave Nitro a little bit of a nod over Raw for this night. But, pretty close. So after 1 week, we have Nitro 1, Raw 0.
Mm-hmm. And then do we have we should pull the ratings. I think Nitro won this one.
Yeah, I don't know the ratings. We really probably should have done that.
Yeah, so we can compare how the fans turned out versus how the ours went. I can see if I can pull it up quick. I think Jeff had it in our review, which I had up but I closed.
Way to go.
Yeah, I know, right? Anyway, we'll find it. All right, so yeah. Let us know if there's anything you want to hear or didn't work. We'll track a few things like Chad mentioned. We'll track the where the big boys play, and also I guess we'll track hidden gems, right? Chad, would you put Norton Savage on the hidden gem list or not quite?
I don't think quite. I think Finish holds it back, okay. And I do have. I don't know if I want to trust this site though because it has a rating for Raw on September 4th.
I got it right here. No, Nitro won 2.5 to 2.2. So Nitro.
Okay.
Yep. So Nitro won nothing.
All right.
So
cool.
If you want to mark that down, you can there. All right. So no hidden gems just yet, but we will. Okay. But we will track.
My computer's dying.
Where are you gonna go? We're out of time. But we will track we'll track some hidden gems too along the way, and we can publish that. So if you have any feedback for the show, let us know and share your awards too. Share your grades that Nitro Raw win this week. I don't think we have a set cadence for the show, Chad. Right? We're just gonna kind of do it when we can.
Yeah.
Hopefully a decent, at least maybe 2 to 3 a month or something. We'll try to be here with because it is a lot of fun. I do want to watch this stuff. It entices me to get through. All right, so next up, episode 2 will be Fall Brawl. So no WWF next episode. We'll just go through Fall Brawl 95, kind of deep dive into that. It's a pretty interesting show. It's got some pretty good stuff in it and some hokey stuff. So we'll get into that. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I enjoyed this. Of course, we went longer than we thought, but it was fun to unpack.
Of course. All right, check out the GWWE Tag Teams Project as well. It's all over social media. You can get in on that, PlayStation.com each and every day. That's Chad. I'm JT. We're out. Talk to you. I got to come up with a good close for the show. I don't have one yet. It's War. What is it good for, I guess? Whatever. We'll be back next time. Talk to you later.